Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today to talk about this really important topic, I think, particularly around this time of the year when we have so many children at home having a break from school, maybe home with parents. And, most of us these days have some sort of device in our home. So it could be a phone, it could be some sort of game device, it could be a range of different things. And we are so used to that being part of our life that I think sometimes we forget that we need to moderate that. It may not always be the best thing. And that's what today's session is going to be about. We're going to have a bit of a look at what screen time is, the good, the bad, and the ugly, basically. And we'll talk about ways that you can moderate that in your family so that you can use technology to the best advantage for yourself, but also for the children that you have in your home. So I'm going to just minimise my face a little bit. You can see Christmas tree behind me. It's nearly Christmas, a few days out from Christmas. So I do hope that wherever you are, that you're enjoying these celebrations and, getting ready for Christmas. And I've named this webinar, Why Can't I Have the iPad? Managing screen time in a world of technology. And that's what we're living in now, isn't it? It's a world of technology. And, if you're of my vintage or even a little younger, we didn't grow up with all of this technology. Children today are born into it. So that's just a part of their life. But it's up to us as the adults, I think, to moderate just how much is used by our children now. So let's get started. So that we get the best of this today, and thank you for those who have joined me, let's not have any distractions. Take some notes if you need to, maybe some key ideas, key points that you might want to put in place in your own family. We're going to talk for about 45 minutes. So I ask during that time that you have your phone off or at least on silent so that you can focus on what we're discussing today. So it is about screen time today. We're going to talk a little bit about the brain too, in brain science, and what's going on in the brain when we're focused on these screens all of the time. We're going to talk about how much screen time is too much, give you some takeaway tips and think about what's next for you. Okay, so this is me. There's some of my achievements on the left-hand side there. The most important one is the first one, that I'm a mother of 4. They're all beautiful adults now, all grown up and in various parts of the world. So I'm from Australia, and I've got 2 children left here in Australia and 2 that are overseas. So, and they all have partners and they're all settled and they're all happy and everything is good. But that, I think, is my greatest achievement. The things below that are important to me, very important to me in my professional world. And, I do what I do to help improve the lives of children everywhere globally. So in doing that, I do a range of different things. You can see me there in other parts of the world where I work globally. You can see me doing online presentations, face-to-face presentations with early childhood educators and parent groups. So I do a range of different things, and I love every single part of it. But today we're going to be talking with you about screen time. So what is that? Well, back in the olden days, on that left-hand side there, when we had black and white TV and there was one TV in the house and there was no remote control, we all gathered around that TV and we had selected periods of time where we could sit and watch TV. If you needed to change the channel, you actually had to get up, walk over to the TV and actually turn the dial. Some of us might remember that, some of us might not. But to do that meant that you had to be mindful about what you're actually doing. It wasn't just sort of sitting back, reclining and clicking. It was actually focused on what you were doing, having to get up, make a conscious effort to actually do something with the screen. And usually, back in those days, the television stations that broadcast the TV shows wasn't on 24/7. They were only available for a certain period of the time. So there was none of this unended screen time. So we had to moderate and decide when we were going to watch TV and when we weren't able to. But these days, on the right-hand side, a lot of children have their own devices. It could be a phone that their parents give them to use. It could be their own, depending on their age. It could be an iPad, it could be a gaming device, it could be the TV, it could be a computer, it could be a laptop, it could be a range of different things or a mixture of all of those things. So I guess in essence, children have the opportunity to engage with a range of different screens. You can see on the bottom left there that you know, there's not a lot of communication happening there in that image. Each person is on a different screen. I'm not sure whether the mum out the back lying on the couch is actually reading something or whether that's an iPad that she's looking at, but each one of them is engaged in something solitary. The same with the bottom right. The children there are engaged in something solitary. There's not a lot of communication going on. There's not a lot of connection going on. The focus and the, I guess, passive interaction is with the screen. And that's not really how people are wired. So have you ever heard these statements? Better start young with technology or you'll be left behind. There's no difference between the TV, the iPhone or the computer, and educational games are interactive. Well, I'd like to challenge every one of those points. So start young or be left behind. So that's pretty much saying, well, we live in a world of technology, so we have to allow our children to be proficient in it, otherwise they'll be left behind in the future. I don't think that's the case. I think that children can learn skills around technology by giving them quality periods of time with some sort of technology, some sort of device. I don't think it has to be 24/7. I don't think it even has to be 3, 4, 5 hours. I don't think it has to be something to use when you go out. I think it can be used really productively in small doses, but quality doses. There's no difference between TV, the iPhone, or the computer. Well, I hate to tell you, but there is. The iPhone or the computer or the iPad is something that's held sort of at that distance. Now, there's a lot of blue light in those devices, and the blue light goes into the occipital nerve, which runs to the back of the head here. So it goes in through your eyes, back to the occipital part of your brain that manages your eyes. And that blue light can impact on your sleep patterns. Now, a TV is a little different because whilst the same thing occurs, the TV is at a distance. So it's not as important with the TV. So, you know, if you're going to have some sort of screen interaction before bed, it's better to be watching a TV rather than your phone lying in bed or an iPad or something that's close to your face. Educational games are interactive. Well, educational games can be thought-provoking. They can make you think, particularly if it's a crossword or something like that, where you have to use your brain and have to use your thinking. They are really good for fine motor control and coordination, because often you have to, you know, press buttons and, you know, coordinate with things. Interactive, well, they don't talk back to you. But you can't have a conversation with an iPhone or an iPad, really. I mean, I know Siri talks to us and Google talks to us, but that's not a real conversation, and that's not what I mean. I think you know that. So interaction means interacting with people. That's how we're wired. We are people and we need to interact with people. So when people say that educational games are interactive, they're not interactive in a personal way. They can allow you to practice some skills, but that's about as far as it goes. And some are better than others. So let's look at some research now. And, you know I've had 4 children, I told you that. And during that time, my children too used gaming devices, and you know they had when they became teenagers, I got them phones so that it was more of a safety issue rather than anything else. But they had phones, and so you know I've done the same thing. I've you know allowed my children probably have to have too much screen time at times, but now I know better. Now I've learned a little bit more along the way, so that's what I want to share with you now. Because Australian children on average spend 52 hours a week in front of some type of screen. So as we've just said, the screens range. It could be a phone, could be a computer, could be anything. 52 hours, that's more than a full-time job. And how do they fit that in around school and around social events and around other things, sport maybe that they're doing? How do they fit all that around? You know, all of those things. So I guess before school, after school, into the night, soon adds up. Weekends, it adds up. Sadly, things are changing too around the amount of physical activity that our children have, and this is worldwide. Most children have a maximum of 40 minutes each day outside, and a lot of that time is when they're at school and they're having morning tea or afternoon tea and it's playtime at school. That's where they get that outside time. The rest of the time they're either in school or they're inside watching TV or on playing games or doing some sort of screen activity. Only 1 in 3 play outdoors for fun. So if you know, 3 children, only one of them is actually playing outside for fun. The rest are on some sort of device. A generation ago, so when I was young, I guess, when I was sort of much younger, 3 out of 4 children played outdoors. So we were always outside, playing games of catchy, playing with balls, playing hide and seek, doing things outside and interacting with other children and using our brains and using our imagination and being creative and communicating, talking to each other. That's the way I grew up. And I don't say that we have to go back to that way. That's not what I mean. But we do need to have that interactive style with our parenting, and we do need to encourage our children to get outside, connect with nature, connect with Mother Earth, and breathe in the fresh air and do some exercise and not be sedentary, because there's implications for that, and we're going to get to that shortly. So 52 hours a week in front of a screen is pretty big. And that's children, ranging up to about teenagers. So, that's a lot of hours. And in America, I'll just move this, in America, it's up to 18.6 hours that children are on a screen a week. Now, that doesn't sound very much when we've just said 52 hours for the Australians, but this is just children 2 to 10, and this is according to what their parents say. So whether this is really accurate, I'm not sure. The other statistics was from a government agency. So I'm not so sure that this is accurate. And this was 2017, so it might even be more than it's listed here. So indoor screen-free play was 14.5 hours. Outside play was 10.5. Doing things with the parent or an adult screen-free was only 9 hours, 9.5 hours. Structured play, so that's sport, playing Saturday morning sport or after school sport, was 5.5, just over 5 hours. And homework only accounted for nearly 3 hours a week. So I'm not sure that those statistics are actually accurate when we think about what we know in our own family and we think about what we know about our friends' families and the amount of screen time and amount of play time that children are balancing their life with. But it does give us pause for thought. It does make us think, because regardless of what the numbers are there, the point is screen time and screen-based play is something that children engage in the most in that 2 to 10 age range. Now, in that 2 to 10 age range, you would hope that playing outside and getting some exercise would rate the highest, not a screen. So during 2020, of course, it's been very different because of the pandemic, with children and teenagers having homeschooling as a necessity. Of course, it's different. And of course, it's bumped it up significantly, so that, there's up to 70% of time that's spent, engaging in screens. And parents wish that they could monitor the screen time a little bit more than that. So 70% of the parents say that they want to monitor that a little more. There's 30% of parents who have purchased some sort of screen for their children in 2020, and that's probably because of the need for the online schooling. But you can see that a lot of the parents there have a great concern about the child being exposed to cyberbullying. There's 61% there that are worried about that. There's others that want to decrease the amount of time their children are spending on screens, but of course it hasn't been possible in 2020. Now, the thing that worries me about this is because we've started this momentum in 2020, how can we rein it back in? Children are used to being on the computer all the time now, or on some sort of screen or some sort of device, because they've had to. And parents have had to encourage it, and parents have had to allow it, and teachers have had to promote it. And that may not necessarily sit with everybody as well as it should, or as well as maybe the research suggests that it shouldn't. So 2020 is a different year. So what does that mean for us in 2021, 2022, 2023? Do we want to continue with that same level of screen time, even when the necessity isn't there anymore? Or do we want to start moderating it and start thinking about, okay, well, in 2020, we had to have additional screen time. We had to have children online doing all of their learning. Do we need that in 2021? Do we need that in 2022? Could we have a balance? Could we reduce it slightly and encourage more outdoor playtime? Encourage different communication methods other than a screen? How about writing a letter? Teaching some literacy by actually writing a letter to somebody instead of sending an email or sending a text. How about we actually go back to old school a little bit and blend the two together? So technology isn't all bad. So there's plenty of good things to do with technology, and one of them is sharing the technology with the children. So it might be working on some sort of research project together, or it might be the child expanding on their own interests through research. It might be connecting with family and friends, and that's a beautiful thing that we now have the technology that we can get on FaceTime and we can talk to someone face to face who might be on the other side of the world. And that's a real plus. That's keeping families together and sharing information with families. That's a good thing. We can create and develop things with technology. You know, we can design things, we can be creative with there's, you know, so many apps and so many programs that you can create and design and build 3D buildings and all sorts of things because of the technology. There's also future jobs there, because if you're good at this sort of thing, there's a whole range of different things that you can do in the technology field. It could also save lives, because you know there's a lot of different apps and different processes that people can use if they're in a bad situation. They can just press a button and you know the internet takes over and someone is alerted and there's help that's on its way. So technology isn't all bad, and screen time isn't all bad. We can learn a lot of stuff from the screen. Just ask Mr. Google. He knows everything. So we can learn a lot from technology. We can learn a lot from using screens. But what I'm saying is we have to be mindful to moderate that, not just have open slather. As parents and as teachers and educators, we need to be mindful of how much exposure children have to that, because we don't want to encourage that at the risk of reducing the human interaction. So what's going on in the brain with all of this technology? I've told you a little bit about the occipital nerve that sits at the back of your head, which always amazes me, by the way, because your eyes are here, but what runs your eyes is sitting at the back of your head. So it always amazes me. So we know that 90% of brain development happens before a child is 5. Most of us know that now. Most of us are really switched on to the importance of the early years. We know, if you listen to my last webinar, you'll know that there's three parts of the brain. There's the instinctive brain, which is the brainstem, that sort of sits here. There's the emotional brain, the amygdala, which sits in here, the limbic system. And then there's the thinking brain that covers this whole section here, including the executive functioning skills in the prefrontal cortex here. So there's 3 different areas of your brain, and they're all stimulated differently by the screens that we become involved in. Now, we've talked about the screens, but now let's talk about what we can do to sort of mediate the use of the screens. Children need, people need, human beings need strong human relationships, and we need physical touch because we're human. So if you as a parent or as an educator, teacher, can develop experiences that promote the opportunity for children to explore their environment, give them chances to solve problems, make decisions and collaborate with other people, giving them scenarios or problems where they can take a risk and try new things in a safe environment. They can help see things from a different perspective. Or if we can create and imagine and support children to think about different ways to approach the same situation. We also want to encourage children to develop really strong oral language skills and communication with a range of different people, because oral language is the basis of reading and writing. So we can't read, we can't write if we can't speak. So oral language is really the basis of all of that. If we're stuck in it, looking at a screen day in, day out for extended periods of time, we start to lose that art of conversation. We tend to just get a grunt from the children when we ask, so what would you like for dinner? I don't care, because they're engrossed with this. That's not what we want, is it? We want to be having really deep, meaningful, rich conversations with our children that includes eye contact, it includes a smile, it includes that relationship building and that connection. That's how humans function. By having a screen in front of us all the time, it makes that very difficult. I often say to early childhood educators when I'm doing some mentoring with them that, you know, part of their documentation is to take photos of the knowledge that the children are developing and the growth that children have and what they're learning. That's part of their documentation process. But let's put the technology down, let's put the camera down, let's put the phone down, and let's actually engage, because the screen is actually a barrier to you actually interacting with the child. The screen is like this, so it's a barrier. It's much better to be able to interact face to face and connect with that person. So, you know, we have these neurons and we have these synapses in our brain, and the electrical impulses, which is the message, the signal. It's also hormones jump from one synapse to the other. They jump that little gap there. And sometimes they jump that gap and they fall through, and we call that leakage. Now, to prevent that, the body is really smart, and the brain, over time, in those first 5 years of life, or first 7 years really, starts to wrap this jelly-like substance to close that gap. And you can see down there in the little image on the bottom right there, those little jelly-like things that are connecting everything together. And that's so the message or the electrical impulse can go smoothly along that synapse highway and doesn't fall out and leak. So without that myelination, children sometimes don't follow through what you ask them to do. We talked a bit about this in our last session, if you watched the last session. So you can ask them to do, you know, can you go and get the knives and forks, set the table and get the plates? Well, they might go and get the knives and forks, and then they put them down on the table and walk off and go and watch TV, because the rest of the message leaked. It leaked out. They didn't even get the rest of the message. And you're looking at them saying, what? You know, you've just left them here on the table. I asked you to do this, this, and this. But they've forgotten all of that totally. So they go off and do something else. That's part of that is development. Developmentally, that myelination kicks in and develops and grows and gets stronger, and the myelination gets thicker and thicker, and everything works better and better. So that's part of it developmentally. What you have to do as a parent or as an educator is to know when it's the developmental myelination happening or when it's just an avoidance of doing the job, and that happens too. We know that our children have a short concentration span. So with all of these screens, and it's so like boom, 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 like things are happening all the time on the screen, it maintains that concentration, which means which means when they haven't got the screen, it's very difficult to maintain their conversation and their concentration because they're expecting things to be entertaining and quick. Well, as humans, we just want to have a conversation or we just want to connect with them. We don't necessarily want to entertain all the time. But that's what we get used to if we're constantly on a screen. We forget the art of conversation. We forget the art of just relaxing our eyes and just having a conversation with people. And that's what I want to try and promote, because that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that children will start to lose the art of conversation. And in their future, when they have a job, when there's a lot of artificial intelligence that are doing the menial tasks, what humans will have to do is communicate. And they will have to be rich conversationalists. They will have to have empathy. They'll have to think outside the square, be creative, be imaginative, do all of those things. If they're used to being supported by a screen and having the screen make all the decisions for them, it's very hard for their brain to start thinking in that way. And our brain regenerates every year or so, and it's that idea of use it or lose it, and that's exactly what happens in the brain. So we need to make sure we're giving our children opportunity for them to extend themselves. Really important. So screen time. So this is as much for us as it is about our children. So in 1960, that was a pretty, if you got some information, maybe reading a book or talking to somebody. Now we get 3 times as much information in one day because of Mr. Google. 61% of people can't ignore their electronic devices and they check them within the hour after getting an email, a text or alert. How many times have we had our phone or we've been out with somebody and it goes ding and they constantly look at their phone, or they might even stop mid-sentence with you and respond to the person that's text. How many of us, if we're on Facebook, check our Facebook, check how many likes we've got on Facebook? And remember, on Facebook, we only put the happy things. Not a lot of us put the terrible days that we've had or the vulnerable things that have happened to us. Not a lot of us do that. We mostly put on the happy things. Now that can impact on other people's mental health because people compare. And so you compare with all of these happy snaps from your friends and you think, well, my life's not like that. And so it can be quite discouraging and quite, we can feel quite despondent around that whole thing. So there's 3 out of 5 people who spend more free time on their computer than they do with their significant others. So that's a bit of a shame, isn't it, that we choose to spend time with a screen rather than the person that we love. And that can be the case with our children too, that as adults, we can be so preoccupied with, the texts that we're sending or the emails, because, now with the advancement of our phones, we can get our emails. Our whole life is on our phone, which means we don't turn off. We leave work and we still check our emails at night when we should be focusing on our children. So learning how to turn that off and reduce the amount of stress in your life is a good habit to have. That's something that I'm continually striving to do, to be able to turn the phone off and not check anything related to work in the evenings so that I can have some downtime and I can relax. So unfortunately, there are some negative outcomes if there's too much screen time. There's a lot of research around impacts of excessive screen time. So children, all of us, can become a little heavier because we're not moving around as much. We're not expending that energy. We're sitting, we're eating, we're often alone, we're often at one with the game, or at one with our emails, or at one with Facebook. And there's not a lot of communication and interaction. So we end up being quite isolated. We can end up being quite addicted to it as well, because we get that constant stimulation. So you press a button, something happens, press a button, something happens. So you become addicted. And the more you do that, the harder it is to go out into the real world and communicate with people. And you don't want to, because it's boring. because it's not so exciting. It's not things happening and, you know, lights and colours and things happening all the time, or someone telling you something more on an email. So we have to be really careful about that. Because we're addicted to it, we don't sleep so much. Because we don't sleep so much, our metabolism slows down and we put on more weight. So it's this cycle. There's this antisocial behaviour that I hinted at a moment ago, where we lose the art of communicating and talking. Can't have a conversation with someone because, and if you do, it's a rushed conversation because you want to get back to the game, or you want to, you know, do the next level of something. So that we can lead to depression, anxiety, and that whole withdrawal. Now, the World Health Organization has recognised this is an issue, and they say that improving physical activity, reducing sedentary time, and ensuring quality sleep in young children will improve their physical, mental health and well-being, and help prevent childhood obesity and associated diseases in later life. There's been quite a lot of research around this, and children who are, all of us, who are engaged with life, engaged with other people, engaged in conversation, have less health issues when we're older. So we put less of a strain on our health facilities when we're older. We are more productive at work, which means we're happier at work. So there's less issues of depression and anxiety because we're happier at work. A lot of people do this. A lot of families sit in front of the TV and eat. So it means they're not communicating with each other. When we sit around the tables to communicate with each other, we're setting up really good habits for when our children get older, and we want them to be telling us what's going on in their lives and what's happening with them. So we know what's going on in the brain at this time. We know that we've got to be stimulating the brain, and we know that we've got to form those connections. So we have people going out to dinner at a restaurant. They sit down and everybody in the family whips out their device. I noticed it one day when I was sitting by myself having coffee or something, and this family came in for dinner, and they literally did that. 4 of them sat down at a table just across from me. The parents pulled out their iPhones or the iPad. The mum had the iPad in her bag, so she gave the iPad to one child, her phone to the other child, and the dad pulled out his phone, and the mother had something else that she was looking at. So they all sat around a table in a restaurant on their devices. And I thought, why didn't they just stay home? They could have saved themselves all that money and just sat around their own table and done exactly the same thing, because they weren't communicating at all. They weren't even discussing what they wanted on the menu. So I see that over and over again, and I'm sure you have too. Do you know that there's even a device that you can hang on a pram so that children can watch a movie while the parents take them out for a walk, or they can swipe and do different things on the iPad while they're in the pram going for a walk? The mum's got headphones on, walking. Now, a better solution to that would be to get rid of all of those devices, the mum to talk to the child about what she's seeing around, you know, oh, look at that beautiful red flower, oh, there's a blue car, talking about things in the environment to develop that level of language and a level of conversation. So mealtime is a time for connection. It's a time for conversation. Putting a device there is probably not a great idea, and maybe mealtimes could be the device-free zone. When my children all had devices, it's still the same rule, you know, no phones at the table. So I had a bowl, and all of their phones had to go into the bowl while we had our dinner, so that we would sit and we would talk. And then after that, they could get them if they wanted to. This is when they were teenagers. But the rule still remains. They're all in their 20s now, and they know that when we sit down together, the phones go away. We are together as a family. And it's helped in that real bonding and connection between all of us. So a bit of a guide for you. Children under 2 shouldn't have any screen time at all. You should be talking to them, discussing things, looking at the sky, looking at the clouds, talking about the flowers, communicating with the children, because they're learning in this really important period of their life. Their brain is developing. 3 to 5-year-olds should only have an hour a day. 6 to 12s should only have 2 hours a day. And as children get older, 13 to 16 to 18, 2 hours a day, with a few extra things thrown in there as well. So we say, this is just another way of looking at that information, that 18 months or younger, no screens, a little bit when they're older, a little bit more limited screen time when they're 2 to 5. And if they're 6 and older, it's time limits, consistent time limits, so that it's not just open slather. There's boundaries and there's structure, because that's how children feel secure and they feel safe. So some tips for you. When your child is watching TV or they are on some sort of device, co-view it with them. That means you view it too. So, you know, video chat with families to somebody else in your family on the other side of the world or wherever they might be, the next city, but do that together. If you're watching TV, do that with the children and talk to the children about what's on the TV, what the storyline's about, what do they think about the characters? Would they have done the same thing as that character did? You know, talk about what you're doing together, so it's a joint thing. So even though the screen's involved, it's a more of an interactive way. As a parent, or even as a teacher, don't feel that you have to bring technology into your home too early. You don't. The children aren't going to be left behind. They're going to pick it up as easy as anything. So don't worry about that. If you are worried about that, just moderate it. Just give children a little bit of screen time, a little bit of technology as they're growing up and getting older. Maybe have nights where you turn off the TV, no devices. One night a week and you play board games. Have dinner, and after dinner you play games. So you have to bond the family, talk, have fun, laugh together, no screens. And for us as adults, we have to model putting our screens down, putting the phone away and being present with the people that we love. Some device-free zones should really be your bedroom, meal times, some playtime and outside play. There should be times where you have to think about this as a parent and you work out, okay, where are the boundaries for the screens and playtime? How am I going to integrate all of these things together in our family life so that children aren't reliant on the screens? They're not the go-to option. And we shouldn't, none of us should have screens an hour before we go to bed, because as I said before about the blue light, it interrupts our sleep pattern. So those of us who go to bed and check Facebook or check our emails before we go to sleep, we shouldn't be doing that. We should have done that an hour ago. And when we go to bed, that's, you know, you have a space between when you turn off those devices to when you go to bed of about an hour, to relax your brain, to relax all the neurons so that your brain is thinking, okay, it's dark outside, there's none of this light in my face, it's time for me to start winding down and going to sleep. So a couple of other tips before we finish. Go for a walk. Notice things. Notice things for yourself, notice things with the children. Notice the environmental print. Like if you're walking past the shops, have a look at what the signs are saying. Talk to your children about it. What do you think that shop might sell? What does the sign say? Let's look in the window. What do you think they might sell? Play I Spy. And you can do that with all ages of children. If the children are young, you can say, I spy with my little eye something that's red. And they have to choose. They have to look around and try and work out what it is that's red. Or you can say, I spy with my little eye something that begins with the letter R. And then if they're younger than that, still, and they're still learning their sounds and letters, you can say, starts with the letter R and it has a R sound at the beginning, so that you're teaching them some literacy and numeracy concepts along the way. Read books. Books are just so great. Read books before bedtime to your child. If you read one book each night from birth to when your child is 5, that would be 1,750 stories that you would have read your child. Amazing start to his or her oral language development and literacy, reading and writing opportunities later on when they start doing that. Amazing. Add some open-ended materials to the playtime. So just have a big box at home and have some lengths of material, have some feathers or some puppets or some long pieces of plastic, different things so that children can use their imagination and build cubby houses or take them outside and invent something. And model this serve and return conversation that we talked about in our last webinar. Use those open-ended questions. So I wonder what would happen if, and then keep on going. Or tell me more about what you think about why the clouds are moving in the sky. So that you're giving the children opportunities to think and problem solve. So it's all about balance, isn't it, really? It always is in life. It's about balance. It's about balancing that play, work, learning, the self-initiated time, time alone, the time outside, your time inside, your time to be quiet, time to be boisterous, and your time with others. So thinking about how you're going to manage all of that in your family is an important thing, because we need to have a balance, not just be reliant on screens to occupy the children because we're busy. We need to start thinking about other ways to do that. So that's great, isn't it? We might know all this stuff, but what about doing it? It's sometimes easier said than done, isn't it? Particularly if your family is already in a different routine and already having quite a large dependence on devices, as most families have now, particularly because of 2020, but also because devices are so readily available. Like, they're everywhere. Every household almost has got some sort of device. I bet every one of us have got a phone. So when we reflect on this, I want you now to have a think about yourself, your habits with your technology, your child, and how that impacts on your family. And I wonder if there's any surprises for you. Something to think about, I think. So where to now? Because we want to move from screens to stronger relationships in our family. So to start with, notice the amount of screen time that you're modelling. Look at your own habits as a parent or as a teacher, educator. Look at your own habits with your screen time. Start thinking about routines when screens can't be used and when it's okay to have a screen with you, or when it's okay to be playing at some sort of video game or watch TV or just be, looking at something on Google, exploring Google. Think about some routines, put some times in place. So maybe in the afternoon between 4 and 6, that's screen time. Other than that, it's not. Or 5 and 6. This is important to build those relationships, and we talked a little bit more about this in our previous webinar. So spend 5 to 10 minutes a day with your child and make it clear that this time is just for them, because we want to build those relationships. We want to get away from the screen time and we want to build to relationship time. So if you make an effort to spend 5 or 10 minutes with each one of your children separately, that will go a long way to building those bonds and building those relationships, particularly when you say, let's you and I just go out and look at the clouds in the sky, just you and me, this is our time. And at the end you say, thanks for spending this time with me. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Something like that, so that there's a beginning and there's an end to the time, so your child knows that that was actually time just for them, that they're special to you. And just as a bonus, children love boundaries and they love structure. Even when they complain, it makes them feel secure and makes them feel safe, because they know their parents have got them, or their teachers have them, or the educators have their back. They're safe and secure, even though they complain. Don't worry about the complaining. Stick to it, because it's actually better for them in the end. So that's really all we have about screen time. But I do want to share with you that I have an e-course for parents on my website. If you go to futurestrongeducation.com and go across the top bar there, and it says courses COVID-19. If you click on that, it will take you to a space where you can engage in a parent course if you want to. Now, because it's Christmas time, I've taken $20 off, $20 off the price. So it's $77 AUD, Australian dollars. And in the course, you'll see there's 10 modules. And each module is made up of a little video that's about 10 minutes, so it's not too long. Sometimes I got carried away and it might be 15 minutes, but it's about 10 to 15 minutes each little video. And there's a great workbook that I've prepared for you as well, and you can work your way through the workbook. And that's actually a family action plan. And the things that I'm covering in these free webinars, this series of free webinars, some of it is in the, well, all of it is in the course, and some extra as well. So I'm giving you a snippet in these webinars because it's all completely, you know, well, it's probably more expanded upon. That's what I'm trying to say. It's expanded upon in the e-course, the Happy Kids, Happy Parents e-course. And it's so that you can develop an action plan for your family, so you have a happy family. So you might want to have a little bit of a look at that. That special price is going to be available for the next probably 2 weeks until New Year, and then it will go back up to the $97. So what do? I do all of these sorts of things. I wear many hats. So I often present to parent groups, early childhood educator groups. I speak at conferences, I do keynote presentations, I do professional development workshops, I have the online courses. I speak globally, and these days, you know, here we are. It's interesting, isn't it? We're doing this through a screen, and that's how a lot of work is generated now with all businesses. It's through this sort of technology. So technology is a good thing. So I work globally. I work with a range of different organisations, people, and parents throughout the world, and in Australia as well. So you can come and find me at futurestrongeducation.com. You can send me a message. If you liked this webinar, I'd love for you to send me a message to tell me what you did like about it, and if you've got any suggestions for other topics. What I've been doing is just taking a snippet out of the courses and sharing them with you. But if you've got some other topics, I'm really happy to cover that as well. I think we're out of time for questions, so we won't go there. But I would like you to take some time and go outside with your child and spend time looking at the clouds and just relaxing and going back to your own childhood and being a child again yourself. So thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you're going to take away a few tips, and I hope you enjoy this Christmas time and have a beautiful festive break with your family. Bye for now. I'm Dr. Kathryn Murray from Future Strong Education. Bye for now.